Hi, welcome. I'm Jodie Willmer. I'm a succession planning and diversity specialist, and I'm really pleased you're able to join me at the webinar today. So, today's topic is about board succession planning and how you can find fantastic directors who really meet the needs of your organisation and can help you with your strategic future to deliver on your vision and mission. And we're going to cover off on all the tips and tricks and things that I've learned over many, many years and that I use with my clients now to enable them to get people to come onto their boards, make a fantastic contribution, and also from diverse backgrounds. So let me start by telling you a little bit about me. I'm Jodie Willmer, and I work with organisations and individuals who want to make a difference in the world. And I work with non-profits and strategic planning and also governance. At board specialty is actually board succession planning and diversity. And today's webinar is going to be able to help you with the things that you need to know in order to find fantastic board directors. So a little bit about my background. My first experience on being on a board, I have to admit, really wasn't that positive. I was in absolutely way over my head. I didn't actually know what questions to ask. I didn't understand this whole issue about due diligence. I understood a bit about the difference between governance and operations, but actually I found myself really in a very difficult situation, being quite out of my depth. And this was about 15 years ago. What I learned, and very quickly, was to trust my gut instinct. And actually what I'd uncovered was actually quite a big fraud. And the CEO was involved in this, and also the board chair. So as you can imagine, that was a really difficult situation for a brand new board member, and I was somewhat younger. So I actually learned quite a lot about that, and I drew on the support and advice from mentors and people who helped me through that, and we resolved that issue. And through the many years, I've also been involved in boards as a committee member myself, and also as a CEO of a non-profit organisation. And I had the great honour and privilege of being the CEO of a non-profit here in Melbourne, Australia, for about 8 years. And that organisation taught me a huge amount about the importance of having the right skilled people with diverse backgrounds on the board who can actually change the future and bring their talents, their time, their networks to contribute to the future and also contribute to the great work of the organisation. And what I learned there as the CEO is that I had a role to play as well, and that I could support the board and help them identify what needed to be done and to find people who could contribute their time and talent. And I also learned some of the most difficult situations where we needed to have very open and honest conversations about things that weren't working right. And through this webinar today, I'll be able to give you some ideas on how you can navigate your way through board succession planning and do that with confidence. And also think about ways that you can have a diversity of range of people's experience, backgrounds, ability, gender, even the locations that people come from. Bring such a richness to the experience on your board and also really help you set up for success for the strategic future. So when I was as a CEO on a non-profit board, I really helped bring them in their 90-year history into the 21st century. And now I help other people do that as well. And I've also been on other organisations' boards. I was on the Victorian Council of Social Service board, and I also chaired a board. And I really came to understand and appreciate the value and the importance of having a range of different skilled board members, especially in times of crisis and need. And we know it's a rapidly changing world. So board members more now than ever have to roll their sleeves up and get involved. But obviously there's a difference between governance and operations, and the key is to find the right board directors who understand and appreciate that, who can also help focus on the governance and the strategy side of things and not get down in the weeds. So if you're wondering about how to find great board members and how to approach them, you're in the right place. So this webinar will spend the next 30 minutes or so going through all of the things that will help you find fantastic board directors. Now, let's talk about this thing called succession planning, because when I do board evaluations, and I've worked with hundreds of organisations, not just in Australia, I've had the great privilege of working with some international organisations, that this thing about succession planning is often really misunderstood. Because the thing about planning is that people think that we can plan ahead and then everything will roll out and it'll be fine. I mean, most people understand the notion of a strategic plan, and most people understand the notion of a business plan, even risk management. But when it comes to succession planning on boards, it seems to be this agenda item that just sits there. And it sits there. And people talk about it, and they talk around it, and they have meetings about it, and they say we're working on it. But actually, if you dig a bit deeper and ask the questions, often people are really quite scared. What I've found with working with board directors in non-profits, in startups, in social enterprises, and even for-profit, for-purpose organisations, is that this whole notion of succession planning seems to be quite mysterious and misunderstood. So I'm pleased to tell you to sort of let go of any of those inhibitions, any of those fears, and I'll walk you through some really simple steps that you can find fantastic board directors. The key with succession planning is that you need to actually have a plan. And of course, the best plans are planned well in advance and ahead of time. Now, I've been able to help people find fantastic directors in a really short period of time. And I've also been able to help people plan ahead and do that really effectively. We like to think that we're all invincible, but things do happen. And some of the big fears for directors around succession planning is about what will this mean for them and their relevance. So let's just think about that for a minute. People who come onto boards to volunteer their time, their talents, their skills, their knowledge, in some cases their money, will also be in it for other reasons. And what we need to understand is that board members are human beings as well. They have needs to be liked, to be included, to feel appreciated, to feel safe, and to be respected. And for some people, their voluntary or paid board roles actually form a big part of their identity. And what that means for them is that they need to feel appreciated and also that it's very, very important to their sense of brand and also even kudos. So for some people, to talk about succession planning means to talk about what things would be different, how to be different for them, and what it might look like if they weren't in that role anymore. So some people also fear that it's going to take a really long time. They also don't know who needs to take the lead. So I'm pleased to tell you with the methodology that I've developed, it doesn't have to take a really long time, but you do need to plan ahead. And then who should be involved in succession planning? Well, I'm wondering, is that perhaps a question you have asked yourself? And that's maybe why you're here on the webinar. The people who need to be involved in succession planning needs to be led by the board. And I know from my experience firsthand of being a CEO and also working with boards and reporting to boards, and is that the CEO can and should play a role in supporting the board in order to get really effective succession planning underway. They also have an interest in working with the board in a very collegial way, and it's important that the new directors that come on also can form a good, healthy relationship with the CEO. So the CEO needs to be involved, but essentially it's up to the board to take the leadership role. Sometimes people establish a nominations committee to actually recruit board members, but what we're going to talk about tonight is ways that you can actually go ahead and find board directors yourself. So if you're wondering how to find these great candidates, sometimes people say to me, yeah, but it's so hard to find board members. Well, the question I always ask is, well, have you actually looked? Have you asked the right people in the right way? So we're going to talk about now some of the right things to do and what not to do in order to find those quality candidates who are the right fit, who can bring their talent, their time, and their diverse life experience to your board to make a difference. So I'm going to talk about the 5 best places you can find new directors or board members. I'm also going to cover off on the top 3 ways to approach people joining the board. We're also going to cover off on the 7 ways that you need to be upfront and honest with new prospective board members about what's happening in your organisation. And I'll answer the 5 questions that prospective board members might have and how to answer them. And I'll also talk about the biggest thing that will turn off any prospective board member. So let's get started. So let's think about the best 5 ways to find board directors. Now, one of the key tools that you need is a very, very good position description about the board role and what the requirements are, what the responsibilities are, and what the time commitment is. And when I work with organisations in my one-day program, we also do a really good audit of the skills, the talent, the time that people have currently available, and also how they're contributing that to the board. So let me just illustrate that. Sometimes people have fantastic skills and expertise that is untapped around the current board. So also what happens is that sometimes people don't contribute those skills in a meaningful way. So when it comes to finding people and those 5 places you can go to find them, you need to be really clear of what you're looking for. Because if you just want anyone as a warm body to sit and occupy the seat, well, there's plenty of them around. But if you want someone to fit a discrete gap in skills or expertise or knowledge or networks on your board, then you need to think about that very clearly. So one of my favourite ways of finding board members is actually these sort of serendipitous moments when you bump into people. And the great thing about being open to that is actually being introduced to people who you might not normally meet, or striking up random conversations with people on a plane. What I've found through many years, both personally, professionally, is that when you open yourself up to those experiences, amazing things can happen. And when you let down your guard and you have a curiosity and you want to get to know people, it's a fantastic way to broach a topic and a conversation and meet someone who you might not normally meet. So being open to those serendipitous experiences is also very fantastic. The other great way is actually putting an ad online for a board director. And there are some fantastic websites that I recommend and use. So one of those is Good Company, the other one is Volley, the other one is Our Community. So because you've already got your position description, you're already clear on the roles, the responsibilities, and what's required, it becomes quite easy to put together a really great, succinct, and compelling advertisement for people to get them excited about what your organisation does and how they can contribute. Remember, this is all about them, not about you personally, and not so much all about the organisation. You have to hook into what it is that people care about and why they care and why they want to contribute. So putting an ad online is great. And often people who are looking for board roles have subscribed to newsletters with specific interests. So if you're an organisation that provides welfare support to people who are victims of family violence, or an organisation that provides support to injured wildlife, people who have a passion and interest in what you do can nominate that and then receive the information about your organisation and the board opportunities that exist. So online is a great way to do that. I've also found some fantastic board directors through LinkedIn and Facebook. Not so much Twitter for me, because I'm not really into Twitter that much, but I found by joining groups where I have a particular interest, I've met people who either share that interest or I've been introduced to them by a third party. So online is also a really good way to go. So one of the other ways that you can engage with people and get them excited about your organisation is holding some sort of event where you invite people to come and actually participate in something. Now, this isn't an information session. When I do my one-day programs, we talk about the benefit of running an information session for prospective board members. But what I'm talking about is an event like a brain date. And a brain date is a short event, an intimate event that you can invite people to come who have a specific question that they want to answer or something they want to discuss with someone. And then you can invite other people who have their expertise and knowledge and match them together. And I ran this event recently at the Volunteering Victoria conference with great success because people love that opportunity to dive really deep and get clarity on something that's really been bothering them. And by you facilitating something like that, it also enables people to network. The other thing that I find is really helpful for finding board directors is these collaborative type approaches. So, for example, you might be looking for board members for your nonprofit organisation, and on the same floor in your building or in your friendship circle, there's a couple of other nonprofits also looking for boards. So it's worth considering whether you can collaborate together on a brain date event and actually bring people in and sort of cross pollinate your network so that you get more people involved. What we're trying to look for here is not just people who you haven't met before, but also diversity of backgrounds, of gender, of sexuality, of ability, of appearance, even cultural background, and so that you get this rich tapestry of people who represent all parts of the community, who can contribute their experience and their skills and different points of view to your strategy. So there's a couple of really good tips there on ways that you can find new board members. And some of the things that you can also do is look at the leadership programs and their alumni. There are an amazing number of leadership programs that pop up left, right, and centre. And again, if you keep your eye out on LinkedIn and Facebook, you'll see them come up in your local area or in other areas. So the alumni of these leadership programs are often really hungry to want to contribute back to the community or back to business and add purpose and meaning to their life with their great experience. So go along to those events, their graduation dinners, offer to be a mentor, network with people who are interested, and you might find some fantastic talent there. I find as well one of the other key places to find new prospective board members is through peak organisations and bodies. So, for example, if you've identified that you have a gap in a particular cultural background, and you need to get people engaged and involved, and you want to understand their connections and their life experience to help with the work that you do, peak bodies are a great way to go. And diversity is great for business, it's great for culture, and it's also great for strategic thinking. So think about how you can incorporate diversity in every aspect of your board recruitment process. And there's also organisations that have programs for people who want to be directors. Some of these programs are quite intensive and long, and some of them are short, sharp courses. So the Australian Institute of Company Directors, for example, have alumni of people who are looking for board roles. And I've attended some of their speed dating events, which is actually quite a big event with lots of nonprofits and lots of people looking for board roles. And I've had great success connecting with and understanding the talents that people have to offer and getting them interested in being on the board. There's also some other ones that you might not have heard of called Future Directors and also Director Institute. Again, these are great organisations who have alumni and people who are really interested in contributing to the community or to business in a board capacity. So think about ways that you can form relationships and connections and even let them know of your opportunity to be for board roles and see if they can circulate it to their alumni. In my experience, they've also been really, really helpful in doing that. So the fifth way that you can find fantastic directors is also through your donors and supporters. So this is an area that's often overlooked, particularly by charities and non-profits. So this is where you're actually spending some time as a board in conjunction with the CEO, or if you're a really small organisation, you probably know all of these people anyway. And think about, are there some donors and supporters who could maybe contribute not just their funds, which we appreciate and we want them to continue with that, but could they also contribute their time? So this is also a really important thing to consider because chances are that nobody's ever thought of asking them and they might have fantastic skills to contribute. Now, there's a caveat on all of this. Not always is it the best use of people's skills and talents on the board. And sometimes it's better to have people in a particular project capacity on a discrete beginning and end to take advantage of their skills and talents. So when you're thinking about all these places to find directors, just think about the first question, do we actually need that on the board? Or could we access those skills and experience in a different way? So let's talk about the top 3 ways to approach people who you want to ask on the board. Now, the first thing is, don't ask them to marry you on the first date. I find a lot of people are just so eager and excited about wanting to recruit directors that they sort of ask people in a random and haphazard sort of way. And the important thing is that when you spend the time and get to know someone and understand their motivations, understand their desires, understand what makes them happy, understand their goals, and listen to them very deeply, you'll learn a lot about them. And you'll learn also whether there's a right fit. Remember, this is not about you, it's about them. And so really take the time to understand and listen to people, and don't ask them to marry you on the first date, because it appears very desperate and needy. And also, they might not be a suitable candidate, and it's a little bit awkward if you've already asked them. So be prepared to have some stories. Point number 2 is have stories that you can tell that illustrate the amazing work your organisation and your volunteers and your staff do in conjunction with the community. Because it's through those stories that people can get excited, get them engaged with their heart and mind, and get them thinking about how they could be involved. So stories are very powerful. I'd also invite you to think about using client stories. Now, client stories have to also be done with great respect and not using any personal information that could be identifiable, and maintain their privacy. But client stories or consumer stories can also be amazing ways to help people understand the great work that your organisation does and help connect people with their heart, not just with their mind. The other great idea I have, and I found it to be really effective in approaching people, is doing a face-to-face meeting. Now, just by way of illustration, I was actually invited to be on a board recently, and the person who invited me I've known for quite some time, and what they did was just send me an email. Dear Jodie, would you like to be on this board? I think you've got some great skills to offer us. Now, I have to be honest, I really wasn't impressed by that approach. Being on a board is a huge commitment, and it really requires a tailored individual communication. And if you've really got your eye on someone who might be able to contribute those skills, you need to have a face-to-face meeting. And I'd recommend that you do it in a neutral location where you can actually spend time. Now, the caveat there again is not chewing their ear off. The purpose of that meeting is for you to listen and also understand their motivations and goals. So let's talk about the 7 things that you need to be upfront about with prospective board members. The first thing you need to be upfront and honest about are the strategic issues that are impacting on your organisation at the moment. And that could be your customers, it could be impacting on your staff, your volunteers, your funding, it could be major regulatory change. You need to be upfront about what's happening now and also what that might mean for your organisation. And it also shows that you're abreast of the issues. You need to be upfront about your current financial position. Now, before you get anxious and think this is doom and gloom, there's 2 sides to this coin. One of them is that your organisation actually might have a huge amount of assets and a lot of reserves, or a lazy balance sheet, as a treasurer recently said at a workshop that I ran. And you might be in a really good position to do amazing work with this money. What you might be needing is someone to help give you strategic ideas and advice on how you could best utilise it. Or you might be on an acquisition path to grow your organisation. You might be wanting to buy services. You might want to merge and amalgamate. So your financial position is very important to be clear and understood. Now, most board directors will actually go online and research that anyway with your audited financial statement, but you need to be upfront and honest. The flip side of that is if you're in a really bad financial position or you're nearly insolvent, you need to be upfront about that as well. There are risks, there's duties and obligations of directors, and they need to be aware of what the current situation is. You also need to be upfront about what insurances you hold. Very talented directors are in demand, and they'll want to know that the organisation is protecting them and their assets, and also that the organisation is run professionally. So you need to understand and ensure that you have the right insurances in place, directors and officers liability, volunteer protection, those sort of things, so that people have an assurance that things are all maintained and well and up to date. You need to be upfront as well about any skeletons in the closet. When people make a commitment to be on a board, they're making a deep commitment of their time, but also their personal brand and reputation. So if there are some skeletons in the closet that you're aware of, you have an obligation to come clean and explain that to them so they can make an informed choice about whether they want to be involved or not. And also, if there's something terrible that's happened, you need to let them know what's being done to rectify it. So, for example, if you had bad relationships with funders or there's been some terrible media issue, you need to give them assurance that the issue has been well and truly dealt with and that you can move on. The fifth thing that people will be interested to know is about the culture of the organisation, and then that follows on with the culture of the board. So do people listen to each other? Is there respect? Is there a list of values that's on a piece of paper? But more importantly, are people living it? Are people actually living and breathing those values in the way they interact with each other? And ultimately, culture starts with the board. And they'll also want to understand if there's an awareness and understanding of the difference between governance and operations, or any tensions between the CEO and the board. So let's look at the 5 questions that prospective board members have and how to answer them. Now, often these questions are just in their mind, or they haven't yet thought about it, but at some point in time they're going to ask it. So your job is to help them understand and give them an assurance and clear picture of what's happening at the moment. So they'll want to have an answer to, what's it like being on this board? Do the meetings keep to time? Do people have robust and healthy conversations and disagreement? And are there different points of view that can be expressed? Is the chair a taskmaster? And what's the relationship like between the executive team and the board? And do you have any fun? I mean, come on, let's think about this. People volunteer a lot of their time, often out of business hours, away from their family. And if you have fun, I think you should tell people about that. One organisation I worked with shared a meal every night for their meetings. And it was a fantastic way to socialise and, build cohesion. So if you do things like that, let people know about that, what's special and different and unique about your board. They'll also have a question of, is there anything I need to know? So that's particularly coming back to, are there any risk issues that I'm not aware of? Is there a risk management plan? Does it have like 70 risks on it that are all operational and nothing strategic? So make sure that you're across that so that you can give them that information. They'll also be wondering, will I be supported and respected? Now remember, this is a really big part of our interaction with other people and the way that we have a sense of ourself and our identity. And people want to know what's going to be expected of them, and will they be respected and supported. And the way that you can support people on a board is also about a great induction, fantastic orientation, and also supporting them with any needs they have. And I'm not just talking about dietary requirements on a buffet. I'm talking about if someone has accessibility needs, is there anyone who can support them to use the bathroom facilities, or communication assistance, or Auslan interpreting? And people from different cultural backgrounds, are they going to be included and made to feel welcome? So it's important that you give thought to those things. And also, if you have board members from regional or rural areas, are you going to support them to be able to travel back and forth to the meetings? And if the meetings are going to be online, are you going to make sure that people can have that opportunity to be connected face-to-face in other times? So will I be supported and will I be respected are really important things that people want to know. They also want to know, how am I being protected? Again, about the insurance and about risk. And are there safeguards in place for very vulnerable clients? We all know that there's been some terrible situations that have happened where people have been victims of abuse. And Everybody wants to make sure that the well-being and health of people has been protected. So if you work with very vulnerable people as part of your services, you need to talk about the sort of strategies your organisation's got in place to safeguard people's well-being. They'll also want to make sure that they can make a contribution and that there's an opportunity for them to make a difference. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're all here for. That's what we get up every day to do, is to make a difference in some shape or form. So think about ways that you can help understand more about their motivations and goals and how they can contribute that talent and skills. And tell them stories. Stories are really, really powerful. It's a great way for people to get an insight and a connection with the heart and mind about what the great work is that you do. Now, let's just finish up by talking about what's the biggest thing that you could do that would turn people off. And I'd have to say, in summary, it's neediness. Of course, we all need and want reliable, knowledgeable, experienced board directors who understand governance, who can bring their talent, skills, and time, who reflect the diversity of our community. We all want that. But don't be needy about it. They are not always the right fit for some boards and some individuals. And so don't feel like you've got to go down this rabbit warren, chasing people and wanting them because you feel needy. It's better to have a gap, if you can, on the board and find the right person rather than a person who's not going to be the right fit. And I found as well, sometimes people are a bit wooed by people who come from very big corporate organisations who actually struggle to adjust to perhaps some of the nuances and the issues that non-profits face. It's not to say that's for everybody, but just something to be aware of. So in summary, don't be needy. So we've come really to the end of the webinar today, and I hope that you found it really useful. And we've talked about today the ways that you can find fantastic directors, particularly from diverse backgrounds, and the things that you need to do in order to make that happen. So we talked about the 5 ways you can find, the places you can find those directors, and also what are the key questions that they'll be asking or thinking about, and also about the things that you need to be upfront about and making sure that people are aware of what's happening in the organisation and they can make then an informed decision. And the 5 big questions that they'll have about being a prospective board member. And lastly, don't be needy. Make sure you find the right people at the right time for your organisation. So if you'd like to know more about board succession and diversity, I'd love to hear from you, and I'd invite you to join my Facebook group, which is the Insightful, I forgot what it was called. I'm come to the end. The Insightful Director Mastermind. And also visit my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Jodie Willmer. And that's JODIEWILLMER. Thank you so much for joining me. It was my pleasure to be with you on this webinar. And I'd love your feedback and comments, and see you on Facebook. And if you've got any questions or comments or things that you'd like to ask, feel free to get in touch online or pick up the phone. Thank you so much. Bye for now.